And welcome to the bright side. I am Pharmacist Ben, and thank you for being here. 844-236-6010 is our number, 844-236-6010. If you have questions about health, nutrition, prescription drugs, if you want to wean yourself off your meds and get on a good nutritional supplement program, you've come to the right place. That's why we are here. 844-236-6010 to help spread the word about the power and importance of a good nutritional supplement program, to show you how easy and simple it is to be able to leverage good health using nutritional supplementation, among other strategies. 844-236-6010 is our number. If you want to contribute to the conversation, or if you have a success story you'd like to share, we always love hearing those. 844-236-6010. If you want to purchase longevity products or help spread the word yourself about the power and importance of a good nutritional supplement program and make some money doing it at the same time with a home-based business, call 866-735-2470 or head to brightsideben.com, pharmacistben.com, or criticalhealthnews.com, where you can purchase longevity products. And you can also click on the Join the Team link to sign up to join the Brightside Ben team and start yourself a home-based business for a one-time $30 fee. Click on the Join the Team link at brightsideben.com, pharmacistben.com, or criticalhealthnews.com, or call 866-735-2470. 844-236-6010 is our number here on the Bright Side. We have a couple of guests coming up at the bottom of the hour. Alan Reed and Tawny Wolf have written a book called The 10 Terrains of Consciousness, which talks about the different ways we experience reality, or as they say, we relate to reality. I find that really fascinating. There's all kinds of different psychographic distinctions that can be made. Abraham Maslow was created the most famous of the psychographic distinctions with his hierarchy of needs, the famous Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which starts off with physiological needs, safety needs, belonging needs, esteem needs, and then goes to self-actualization. And each one of these levels is on a pyramid, and it kind of relates to how we see the world. People who are operating in the bottom of the pyramid, the psychological needs section of the pyramid, see the world based on how they can get their psychological needs met. They're focusing on food, on water, on warmth, and rest. Fortunately, most of humanity has gotten past the physiologic needs level of the pyramid. The next level up is safety needs, and this is where many people are stuck. Safety needs are security and safety, basically. We want to be safe. Many people, once people have met their physiologic needs, people are focused on safety needs. Safety needs, people who are focused on safety needs are in this reptilian mode of being, and unfortunately much of our planet is like that. You watched the debate yesterday, you know what I'm talking about. People are in their safety modes. People are freaking out. People need to be secure. Once you've met your safety needs, then you go into higher needs like belongingness and love. That's the third level of the pyramid. Belongingness and love is when you're focused on intimate relationships, on friendships, on connection, on being loved. Now, a lot of people are in this realm too. Probably most people are in these two areas here, the safety needs area of the pyramid and the belonging and love needs. And then there's the esteem needs. These are feelings of accomplishment. These are when you need to feel prestige. And not as many people are up here. You're starting to get into more rarefied space at esteem needs. And then at the top of the pyramid, you have self-actualization. This is the top of the pyramid. There's one level higher. I'll tell you what that is here in a second. According to Maslow, not that many people are in this area. This is when you want to evolve your full potential, when you want to be maximally productive, maximally creative, maximally original. You want to actualize yourself. That's the top of the pyramid. Pyramid, again, physiologic needs at the bottom. Most people are past there. That's when we were cavemen looking for food and water and warmth and rest. There's probably still a lot of people, probably not a small number of people on the planet, unfortunately, who are living at that level, at the bottom level. They have not met the most fundamental needs of a human being. Safety needs is where probably I would say the large majority of people live. Then there's belongingness and love, where probably less, but a significant amount of people are in that area. And then it starts to get more rarefied space with esteem needs and self-actualization needs. At the top you have self-transcendence. And this didn't even make the pyramid because Abraham Maslow came up with it after he came up with the pyramid. And he said, after self-actualizing, there's another level higher. And that's when you transcend the self. And that's when you become spiritual. And that's when you become connected to whatever higher force you want to call it, God or whatever you want to call it. Or at least you're heading in that direction. At least you see the world in that direction. You relate to reality from a self-transcendence point of view. versus a self-actualized point of view where you're relating to reality, where you want to be maximally creative, or where you're relating to reality in the esteem needs section from a sense of prestige and feelings of accomplishment, or lower, relating to reality from love and belongingness or safety or physiologic needs. That's the Maslow hierarchy of needs. There's also another one called another psychographic distinction chart called the spiral dynamics chart. That one's super cool. And I'm not going to talk about that one too much, but just to tell you, it is really cool. It's probably the coolest one I've seen. It involves different colors, and it's. I don't want to digress too much. In any case, we got the 10 terrains of consciousness, that another set of distinctions that Alan Reed and Tawny Wolf have come up with, and we're going to talk to them at the bottom or in our third segment. This idea of relating to reality, I think, is really, really important, because most of us just live the reality that's thrown at us, usually by our society or by our culture. We don't realize we're relating to reality, and we're happy or we're not happy based on how we're relating to reality. It's not just your reality, it's how you relate to it. If a tree falls in the forest, it doesn't make a sound until somebody hears it. There's no reality until something perceives it. So reality is a dance between the perceiver and the perceived, and we have some control over it, how we relate to it. You don't have to have the reality just thrown in your face by your parents or by your culture, or by your society, or by your family, or whatever. You can relate to reality any way you want, and that is a powerful, powerful idea if you want to have a good life. And yes, I know we talk about nutrition, but really we talk about the philosophy of nutrition on this program, even though I do like the biochemistry aspect. But the philosophy of nutrition, the philosophy of good health that we talk about on the bright side, is the idea that we can have good health without a doctor. We can have good health without interference from an outside force, with the exception of food, of course, and air probably. We can have good health by internally. We can have the philosophy, the bright side, I call it the bright side philosophy, says that we have some say in the matter. Oh, it's in your genes. I have diabetes because my mother had diabetes. No. That's what they want you to believe. It's in your genes. They want you to believe you need drugs. They want you to believe you need to be interfered with. Your biochemistry needs to be manipulated by an outside force. So we want to relate to reality with the bright side philosophy from a perspective that we have some control. We have some say. And that's why understanding nutrition and understanding chemistry is so important, and understanding biochemistry is so important, because if we know we have say, the more information we have, the more power we'll have. So how we relate to reality in terms of how our bodies show up is the big picture that we talk about in this program, even though we've been talking about fats, and we've been talking about water, soluble nutrients, and we talk about vitamins and digestive system. Really, it's about relating to reality from a place of power, relating to reality from a place where we have some say and some control over how our body shows up on our own, without authorities. And that includes me, by the way. All right, I'm Pharmacist Ben. 844-236-6010 is our number. You're listening to The Bright Side. We will be back right after this. Don't go away. Okay, we're back on The Bright Side. Lines open for you. 844-236-6010 is our number. We're going to talk 10 terrains. 10terrains.com is the website, and we're going to talk to David Reed and Alan David Reed and Tawny Wolf in our third segment about the 10 terrains. The website is 10terrains.com, and we'll get you your calls this segment, 844-236-6010. So we've been hitting the fats hard here. They're so fascinating for so many reasons. Number one, most importantly, forget fascination, forget coolness, forget biochemistry. They're the most important aspect of anti-aging nutrition. It's in the fats. Sure, protein's important, vitamins are important, or water-soluble vitamins are important, proteins are important, carbs play a role in good health, but fats are the key. And by fats, we mean essential fatty acids, fatty vitamins, phytonutrients, and a few minerals that are handled by or elements, we'll say, that are handled by the fatty system of the body. And this is something, the whole idea of fats is kind of a recent understanding. We knew about the importance of fats 150 years ago or so when we were first starting to understand nutrition. We obviously knew about the macronutrient version of fats. Dietary fats. They were lumped in as carbohydrates, which they are carbohydrates. So basically 150 years ago, and it's kind of interesting when you think about it, we didn't know anything about nutrition until the middle to late 1800s. So around 150 years ago or so, we started to dive into macronutrition, protein, fats, and carbs. Can you imagine the world before 1870? They didn't know about protein, fats, and carbs. They knew meat was good and fish was good, and they probably knew nuts and fatty foods and eggs were good foods. Obviously, they knew that, but they didn't know what they were made of until 1870, 1880. And the first thing they figured out was the macros, the proteins and the fats and the carbs. They called the carbs fats. They called the fats and sugars the carbs. They didn't make that distinction yet. As they started to make the distinction, they realized that fats were an amazing source of energy. They realized that fats had more energy than any other of the macronutrients, so they were starting to value them more and more. But it wasn't until the turn of the century that they realized that there were fats that were very similar to vitamins in the sense that if you pulled them out of the diet, disease and ultimately death would ensue. That was a radical understanding in 1910 or 1915. That's basically around the time they discovered what are called the essential fatty acids, which are fats. You got to think about this now. We knew about fats as dietary, which most people know about them as dietary, but right around the turn of the 20th century, or early 20th century, they discovered that fats had a vitamin-like property, and that if you pulled a couple of them out of the diet, the animal would get very sick, and they would ultimately die. And the first thing that would happen in terms of sickness will be skin problems. And that's a major, major lesson for anybody who wants to have good skin, or anybody who wants to understand how to have good skin, or people in the skincare business like myself. Essential fatty acids are key for healthy, beautiful, youthful skin. In fact, for a healthy, beautiful, youthful body, but because the skin is like an icon for the rest of the body, what's true about the skin is true about the rest of the body. And at an earlier stage, we tend to see deficiencies on the skin first. You can use the skin as a diagnostic tool for assessing whether or not you have enough fats. All right, I'm not done talking about fats. So much more to talk about. We touched a little bit on these things called prostaglandins, which are a form of fat that's derived from essential fatty acids and other fatty acids that get turned into the molecules of inflammation and anti-inflammation. There's a lot of reasons why fats are important, but when it comes to anti-aging, one of the main reasons is because they get turned into these, technically they're called, and don't get all freaked out here by the name, eicosanoids. eicosanoids. These eicosanoids, I very rarely use that word because it's kind of an intimidating word. These eicosanoids are the molecules of inflammation and anti-inflammation. They're your natural aspirin, and they're your natural CBD. Both CBD and aspirin work with this system. So your eicosanoids come from essential fatty acids, or your body's natural aspirin and natural CBD, among other biomolecules. We got lots more to talk about with fats and water. Time to hit the phones, 844-236-6010. We'll definitely be continuing this for the next couple of days. Alan David Reed and Tawny Wolf and the 10 Terrains coming up in our next segment. Let's go to the phones and say good morning to Elaine. What's up, Elaine? Welcome to the bright side.
Hi, thanks again for taking my call.
Thank you for all your support throughout the years. I appreciate you.
Oh yeah. Last week we got cut off. The music started, but yes. I basically asked the question of if this is even so. Where is the soul of this?
Oh yes, I remember. Well, first of all, define your terms. What does soul mean?
It's the immaterial. It's the.
Well, you're answering your question now. So if it's immaterial and the cell is material, where would the soul of the cell be? It wouldn't be anywhere. It's non-local. It's non-local. The spirit side of us and the soul side of us is non-local, meaning it's everywhere. We have this idea in our world, like where everything is local. We just assume that because that's how we see the world. My computer screen is here, my books are there, my stapler's here. You know what I'm saying? All the things in your environment are here and there. Non-local means it's everywhere. Now you say, what the heck does that mean? That's the point. We don't know what that means. That's just theoretical, but there's this thing in physics where it's called Bell's Theorem. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. Bell's Theorem says that when you make a change in one side of the universe, it changes on the other side of the universe instantaneously. Don't ask how they do it. They do it. Have you heard of this concept?
I think so. I think it's been a long time, yeah.
Yeah, so Bell's Theorem says that you make a change on one side of the universe, the change occurs on the other side of the universe, meaning everything's all connected. It's all one thing. There's no space. And that's a really heavy philosophical concept, but it's been shown to be tried and true from a physics perspective, quantum physics perspective. So you can say, does the cell have the soul? You can't really say that because the soul's, like you answered yourself, it's non-physical, and so non-physical things don't have a place. In order for something to have a place, it has to be physical. You get it? If it's not physical, it doesn't have a place. Place implies physical. Now, but it's kind of an interesting question that you asked, though, because I always thought of the soul as being like your very essence of who you are. Like, do you ever walk down the street and you see somebody from behind, but you immediately know who they are, even though you can't see their face?
Right.
You know what I'm talking about? Or sometimes you'll see people and they'll have a mask on, or they'll have something covering their face, but you know who they are. Because there's this essence that comes out of them, right? You can't put your finger on it, but you know that that's that person. Or if you close your eyes now and you think of somebody you know really well, your husband or your kid or a good friend, their feeling will come to mind. Even if you can't see them in your mind, you know what I'm saying? That to me is the soul. So I would say a cell has a soul, but you got to be kind of sensitive to feeling it the way you're sensitive to feeling the personality of a person or the essence of a person, even if they're wearing a mask. And that's really an interesting question, actually, because there's this kind of concept called felt sense. Have you ever heard of this? F-E-L-T, felt sense?
No.
It's a very cool concept. A guy named Dr. Eugene Gendlin, G-E-N-D-L-I-N, came up with this concept of felt sense, and it implies a way of knowing that's not mental. It's in your body. You feel it. Now, you're a massage therapist. Okay. I'm sure you can relate to the somatic senses that we have that aren't mental. It's like our brain, our body has a certain way of knowing things. And so you can assess somebody's soul, if you go by my definition of soul, by the felt sense that you have about them when in your body somehow. Think of your kid. Doesn't your kid arise some kind of felt sense in you?
Right.
And you can kind of distinguish them, even though you can't put your finger on what you're distinguishing. You can distinguish them, definitely. All right, that's a very interesting question. I hope I didn't muck things up, but thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate it, Elaine. And we've got David Reed and Tawny Wolf coming up in our next segment, the 10 Terrains, 10terrains.com. We'll be back after this. We are back on the bright side. Thank you for joining us. We're on the air Monday through Friday, 8 to 9 Pacific and 10 to 11 Central Time, 24/7 on the archive page at benfuchsarchives.com and also brightsideben.com. We've got search engines as well as the longevity products. And a Join the Team link that you can click on at brightsideben.com, pharmacistben.com, or criticalhealthnews.com. News stories, videos, blog posts, interviews, lots of great health information on all the websites. And you can click on the Join the Team link if you want to sign up to join the Brightside Ben team. Don't forget to take a look at our True Skin Health products, all formulated in my compounding pharmacy for wound healing. Wound healing equals beauty, never any preservatives, fragrances, fillers, waxes, emulsifiers, vegetable oil, silicone, nothing your skin doesn't need or doesn't want in any of our True Skin Health products, truthtreatments.com. And take a look at our over 1,000 4- and 5-star reviews at truthreviewed.com. All right, I am so excited to have our next guests on. Their website is 10terrains.com. That's 10terrains.com. Their book is The 10 Terrains of Consciousness. Understand yourself, other people, and our world. And there's a very interesting philosophy that's behind all of this, and that's the idea that we relate to reality in certain ways. And just the idea that we relate to reality can be a revolutionary concept, can be a powerful epiphany once you understand that we relate to reality. It doesn't just show up, we relate to it. So we'll talk about the 10 Terrains of Consciousness with Alan David Reed and Tawny Wolf. Please welcome Alan and Tawny to the bright side. Hey, guys.
Hey, Ben, how are you?
Hey, Ben, lovely to be here with you.
Yes, and it's good to be here with you as well. Are you in the same location here, or is it, you sound like, I hear an Australian? I hear
Australia.
And you're in Australia right now?
We are. It's like,
oh my God. It must be like, it's 1 in the morning?
It is.
Okay, well, I appreciate you coming on, so thank you so much. And very interesting concept. As I was talking before we went to break and earlier in the program, I was talking about this idea that we relate to reality. So you're going to tell us about the 10 ways we relate to reality, but just the idea that we relate to reality can be life-changing once you get that. So can you talk a little bit about that, how first of all, what it costs us when we don't understand that we're relating to reality, we think it's just there, and what we can do to get that kind of, to grok that kind of concept that there's a relating that's happening.
Well, what we have to understand, Ben, is that consciousness, as we're describing it, is underlying all of creation. It's underlying the universe and everything that's going on in the universe. In fact, our entire universe is one mass indivisible consciousness, all the universes, all the galaxies. And so because of that, we are relating to this infinite consciousness with different pairs of glasses on, different ways that we're seeing it. Some more expanded, they're fully in touch with it. Others that sort of are separated from it and don't really understand why things are happening the way they are. So it's different degrees of connection into this field, this quantum field of awareness. And that's what these 10 terrains represent, or continuum as to where you're at in that, either separated from or connected into.
And in a way, you can think of it. I was just going to say, you could think of it as if you're going about your life and you're making your choices and you're doing your behaviors, but you don't realize that you're actually wearing a pair of glasses, which is changing your perception, and you don't actually know that you're wearing these red glasses or these purple glasses, but everything you're seeing is coming through that filter. So that's how you're relating to reality. It's actually a primary relationship to your own infinite self, to other people, to the world, to your beliefs, and everything arises out of that. Your choices, the kinds of people you hang out with, the kinds of work you do. It's kind of like an operating system that's running you, but you don't know it's running you. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about your terrain of consciousness.
Really, your values.
Go ahead.
Well, your values and your perceptions and your beliefs are all coming out of your terrain of consciousness, which is, again, how you're relating to this overall understanding of one infinite consciousness.
Okay, so two things that come to mind when you're talking here. First of all, there's this famous quote: "We don't see the world as it is; we see the world as we are." I don't know if you've heard that. It's kind of famous meme out there. So that's kind of what you're talking about. It's like we're seeing the world as us, not as the world. We're seeing it. We're the ones responsible for how we're seeing it. And then secondly, what is this thing called consciousness that I keep hearing about? Like, what is it? I hear it all the time, and I've been studying it for many, many years. But what is it exactly? What are you referring to? Like the thing called consciousness?
Well, it's a great question, and in some sense, it's probably beyond anything our language could even possibly manage. But to say that, as we can see in, for example, quantum physics, when you have two electrons at two different places, there's a non-locality that's taking place. They're intimately connected across space and time, even beyond speed of light. So when you look at this idea that consciousness, this entire universe, is one consciousness that's aware of itself, every subatomic particle in every galaxy, and there's billions of galaxies and billions of stars, and in these billions of stars, there's planets and billions of atoms and subatomic particles. This consciousness is connected to and aware of all of them simultaneously.
So it's awareness. Is that what you mean?
I'm meaning by consciousness our awareness and I guess an infinite intelligence that's orchestrating everything, rather than the kind of consciousness with a small c, where someone would talk about the consciousness of the brain, like I'm asleep or I'm awake and my brain is functioning. That's a different sense of the word consciousness. He's really talking about the infinite intelligence that's aware of itself and that's coming through all of us in every moment.
Well, that's a pretty powerful thought right there. Just go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, a lot of the current science is looking at consciousness as being, something that's given rise to from our brain reaction, our brain chemistry and what have you. Emergent. The saying is that that's a kind of consciousness, but it's not the consciousness with a capital C, and that this entire universe is self-aware, and we are all of it, and that's why everything is in it. Animals, trees, rocks, everything is self-aware inside of this.
Would you say it's a screen that everything's appearing on, like a movie?
Yes, I would say that's probably one way to look at it, that this is effectively the projector screen that we're in here, that we're actually avatars in one sense. We're carbon-based antennas, that we're transduction devices of consciousness, and we are all really someplace else in the cloud, if you want to really use
I love
that way.
That's awesome.
Consciousness is in the cloud, and we're all just a bunch of local clients.
They're downloading it.
Downloading
I love it.
Thinking we're separate. And I come from Silicon Valley, so there's a whole lot of parallels in technology that are not far from, because we're in a fractal universe. So of course,
that's
if
right.
everything's all the fractals it's gonna fit.
And so
really
now we
the
have.
10 terrains. I was
sorry,
going to
go
say, really, to follow on what you guys are talking about, the 10 terrains of consciousness are really 10 different degrees of connectedness to that infinite intelligence. So if you want to use the internet analogy, people at the more expanded terrains are kind of permanently online, whereas people at the more contracted terrains, they're much more being run by their small mind, their ego, their conditioning, their thinking mind, and they're not as often or as completely connected to the, to the infinite internet, and so they're being run more by their habits and by their fears. And as someone shifts through this continuum of terrains, because it is an evolutionary continuum, people can shift to a different terrain as they expand and they wake up.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome stuff. So we got to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about some specifics about the book, okay? Introducing the 10 Terrains of Consciousness. Tani Wolff and Alan Reed are with us on the bright side. We'll be back with more of Alan and Tani and the 10 Terrains right after this. Back on the bright side, we're talking to Alan David Reed and Tani Wolff about their book, Introducing the 10 Terrains of Consciousness, 10terrains.com. They got blog articles and videos and lots of good stuff at 10terrains.com. So let's dive into it. First of all, before we get into the 10 terrains, Alan and Tani, these are not developmental or sequential, like we have them all at the same time or we go back and forth, or are they?
They actually are developmental and sequential. You can think about it as an expansion that happens as someone grows and develops in their awareness, and they start to heal and clear things and come back to the infinite self that they always were underneath it all. But someone might spend their whole life in one terrain, and someone else might shift through 2 or 3 over the course of their life. But the thing is that if you do have a terrain shift, it's a massive change. I mean, you'll probably want to reassess everything in your life. Like, you might realize you're not resonating with the job you're doing anymore, and you're not connected with the people that you were, and maybe you want to change your lifestyle radically, completely rethink the way you're living, because it's a huge cataclysmic change. They're essentially completely different parallel universes. And for anyone who's listening who's had a massive shift in their perspective, in their awareness, or a big spiritual awakening, or a massive change in the way you're relating to your career or to other people, you probably have had one of these terrain
shift. Do you know about spiral dynamics?
We do.
Yes, we do.
So did you derive any of this, or is this, because it strikes me as being, I mean, you're not using colors, you're using shapes, and you have more shapes or more categories, but some of these kind of overlap, or no?
Well, the anthropology that they used in developing that model, we're similarly looking at parallel anthropology of history, but the difference is we're coming from a non-local perspective, and the spiral dynamics and other behavioral models are looking from a physical outer perspective, and really in our model they're looking at it from about the middle point, from diamond projecting to one degree to the other end, and using some of the history from the other direction. So this is very much a much deeper spiritual model, and it really does go a lot further than what spiral dynamics does.
Okay, so
everybody's looking at the same thing and mapping the same thing. They're just coming from a different terrain.
They're looking at movement, evolution, development, kind of from different kind of viewpoints, but still moving forward or moving in a direction. Like evolution has a direction.
We're seeing the same patterns. We're all seeing the same patterns of shift and growth. It's just they're looking at it from a different terrain of consciousness than we're looking at it from. So that's why the language is different, and the picture that they're coming up with is slightly different because of the vantage point they're standing at from when they're discussing it.
Okay, so I want to dive into this, but you keep saying things that make me want to digress, so I apologize for this. But what's your meta-terrain that you're viewing these terrains from?
Well, this model has come through at the unity-based terrain infinity, which is a terrain that sees the oneness, which is why we're really seeing the evolutionary journey back to the self, back to the infinite self. And the degrees to which we're separated from ourself is really the terrain that we're at. but everybody's going to come to this model from their own terrain. So somebody who's at, let's say, the order-based terrain square or the reflection-based terrain diamond, they may just see it as their evolution, of their growth, as the expansion of their awareness, and the movement from fear to love, or from outer to inner, or from head to heart. These are the kinds of things that start to change. People move from victim consciousness through to unity consciousness. These are the kinds of things that start to shift as someone grows and evolves and moves from one terrain to the next. So, for example, if someone goes from the order-based terrain square, where their sense of safety is coming from being part of a system and buying into the consensus reality and believing authority figures and doing what their parents told them to and contributing to society as the cog in the machine and an upstanding member of society, that they have a massive shift, wake up one day and shift to the terrain after that, which is the reflection-based terrain diamond, which is kind of where we're at in the Western world as the prevailing terrain. They'll start to see themselves as a unique being, and what is my unique life path, and I'm going to decide my identity, and I'm going to decide my gender, I'm going to innovate the system, and I'm going to, customize everything, take things out of the centralized hands and overthrow the systems and create more equality and diversity. So that's what we've seen happening in the last 50, 60 years as that collective culture has shifted from square to diamond. So at each point along this continuum, as a person or a culture or a civilization shifts from one terrain to the next, it's a radical change in how they're showing up, how they're being, the kinds of systems that emerge, the political systems, the economic systems. So why this model is fascinating for people is they can go do our quiz. We have a quiz on our website, 10terrains.com, and it's just a little 10-minute quiz, and you can find out which terrain you're at right now and start to understand the challenges that you're facing at this point in your journey, and the lessons you're here to learn, and also the gifts that you're here to contribute. But you can also then learn about the other 9 terrains and start to understand how other people are interacting and where they're coming from and what makes them feel safe. And then you can start to reduce the conflict in your life because you start to understand where other people are coming from, and also start to understand what's happening on our planet and why things are playing out the way they are as different terrains are clashing with each other politically and economically and socially. So it becomes a really fascinating study for people who are really deep thinkers. This work is really for people who are deep thinkers.
It's wonderful work. It's absolutely wonderful work. So if a coherence-based person talks to a faith-based person, there may be some issues there. Hey, listen, I want to give us a nutshell. I mean, we're down to just a couple minutes, and I'm definitely going to be talking about this for a while because it's beautiful work that you're doing. So tell us, in a nutshell, 5 outer-directed terrains and the 5 inner-directed terrains.
Oh my God! In 1 minute, I'm going to go.
No, just in a nutshell. Each one, list them basically.
Nutshell, the first one, matter-based terrain particles. Think of caveman coming from fear in every moment. Faith-based terrain radial. Think of a fundamentalist who's given all their power to a god or a deity outside of themselves and obeys them to the law. Then the will-based terrain pyramid. These are people who think they need to accumulate wealth and power in order to keep themselves safe. And then we've got the order-based terrain square, where people really believe that the system will keep them safe, and they're buying into the consensus reality and believing in authority and trying to contribute to society. And then we've got the reflection-based terrain diamond, where the shift is people start to realize, I control my own reality, I'm in charge of my identity, and they start to innovate and create, and the human mind is what keeps them safe, and creativity and ingenuity.
And those are the 5 outer terrains because they're sourcing from outside of yourself, and now the next 5 terrains are the inner terrains where you're sourcing from within yourself.
Exactly. And so the shift from the reflection-based terrain diamond to the connection-based terrain circle essentially is a shift from outer to inner. You could also think of it as a shift from fear to love or from head to heart. At the connection-based terrain circle, someone really has a visceral connection to the web of life, and they're coming from collaboration and heart-based decision-making. And then the terrain after that, the coherence-based terrain spiral, someone starts to have a multi-dimensional sense of self, and they're really embodying this understanding that they create their own reality from the inside out, and they're taking full responsibility for the reality that's created in their life. And then the terrain after that, the fractal-based terrain toroid, this is the terrain where someone has a really embodied understanding of the quantum field and the universal principles, and a lot of the great religious teachings and scientific teachings and profound teachings have come through awakened beings who are at this fractal-based terrain toroid. And then the terrain after that, the unity-based terrain infinity, this is the terrain of people who are enlightened, who really are just going through the world without an agenda as a witness in a completely surrendered state. Pretty much permanently online to that infinite internet that we were talking about before. And then the final one, which is just a bookend, you're not going to meet anyone at this terrain, but the void-based terrain, nothing. Think of like ascended masters, people who are beyond physical form, that they're basically beings of light. But these are just the bookends, the particle and no thing at either end of the continuum, just to give us like the complete picture. But the vast majority of people in our day and age will be somewhere between pyramid and maybe spiral. You'll have a few people at radial, a few people at toroid. But, the culture collectively, the gravity of our culture has shifted over the last 40, 50 years in many Western countries from square to diamond, from the order-based terrain to reflection-based terrain. And one of the things that's happening at the moment with this COVID shutdown is just the very beginning of our society starting to, the little baby beginnings of the shift towards circle connection-based terrain, which will probably happen over the next 40, 50 years, but just starting to come back to question our disconnected state that we're living in as a culture at the moment.
You guys are this is so very, very clear, and thank you so much for it. I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, David.
Well, the confusion, we are in a lot of chaos in this time, and it's because we are moving from the order-based terrain into the reflection-based terrain and then to the connection-based terrain. And so what's happening is that people are trying to go into the future from history and from what worked in history, but you can't be successful that way. You have to understand where we're at and where we're going, and by knowing where you're at, by knowing yourself, by knowing your terrain and doing our quiz and finding out where you are in this continuum, it's going to help you moving forward in this confusion as to how to best ground yourself with your career, or how to best ground yourself so that you're really authentically doing what you're here to do. Because at this time, there's a lot of, the mental illness and the psychology on this planet is really being not touched on as much, and that's really important for us to get really healthy.
Alan and Tani, we're out of time. Thank you so much. That was beautiful. Wonderful work. 10terrains.com. 10terrains.com. You guys hold on the line for just a minute. I want to say hi when we're done, okay? That's it for now. Thanks for listening to The Bright Side, friends. Have a wonderful, beautiful, awesome, spectacular day. We'll talk to you later, folks. Bye for now.